Gracias for pressing play and welcome to Smart Chickens, a B2B SaaS where demand gen meets innovation and growth podcast. In today's episode, we have a very special guest, Justin Keller, who is the VP of Marketing for Terminus, a leader in ABM software that powers go-to-market teams to drive more revenue. Justin is an award-winning B2B marketer who hates most B2B marketing. For the past 16 years, he has been building tech brands and marketing programs that people love. Armed with BAs in English, psychology, and honor certificate from the Kelley School of Business and an MBA in General Management from Purdue, he's always seeking to marry creative storytelling with revenue growth. He has experiences integrated in marketing, operations, sales, and customer success at companies like Jazz HR, Visage, Will, and Sigster, which have all experienced admirable exits. He is currently the VP of Brand Marketing at Terminus, the leading ABM platform. He was just awarded the 40 Under 40 recipient and thought leader on the topics of branding, digital marketing, and account-based marketing. And when he's not marketing, he's a music producer and an aspiring at-home chef. We deep dive into his journey as a SaaS executive marketing leader from the Silicon Valley Bay Area to the Southeast Tech Hub in Atlanta, and his recent Break Shit virtual conference, which really struck a chord with marketing and sales leaders looking to break out of bad, boring virtual events. So think Coachella for the B2B SaaS. As always, this podcast is brought to you by our good friends at digitechie.com, a conversational marketing, demand gen, and revenue accelerator consultancy, helping B2B clients scale sales pipelines to drive revenue consistently. And gypsyforever.com, uniquely handmade wellness products to help you connect your mind, body, and soul. So Justin Keller, tell us a little bit about your career journey in B2B and SaaS specifically, because I know that you've worked outside of Terminus, Sigster, and even before that. So talk us through a little bit of that and maybe inform us on how your journey has taken you to where you're at now.
Totally. So without boring all of you to tears, right out of college, I looked into an intern with an entrepreneur, and not as glamorous as it sounds when I start, because my job was to spend my summer in an air-conditioned warehouse organizing 40 years of just all the shit he's collected. And but I paid my dues.
This is Scotty Jones?
This was Scotty Jones, yes, sir. So pretty successful dude. And through that was able to look into my first tech job. And, after kind of sweating it in a warehouse for a summer, said, hey, I'm starting a new company. Will you help me name it? Will you help, kind of start this company with me? So hell yeah, I will, Scott. And so started this company called Cha-Cha, which if you remember, if you're my age, there used to be a time before iPhones and people had, kind of the T9 old flip phones. If you needed the answer to a question, you'd text Cha-Cha 242-242, and we'd have humans on the other end that would answer it for you. And it was a long tail SEO strategy. So went from being a startup to like the 49th most trafficked website on the internet. So we had like a stratospheric run, but then the iPhone came out and I kind of saw the writing on the wall. So I went to business school because I wanted to do the tech thing full bore. And I thought I needed to kind of, have my bona fides if I wanted to do what I did next, which is the day after I graduated, packed up my car, drove to San Francisco to do the tech thing all the way. Mm-hmm. And so was in the Bay for about 7 or 8 years. And that was like a situation where I just faked it till I made it. Like I had a B2C background, not a whole lot of marketing chops, got hired to be marketer at a kind of a SaaS company. And so I kind of like figured it out as I went in the Bay for 7, 8 years. And then came back to Indianapolis to be the head of marketing for Sigster, which led me to where I am now at Terminus. Terminus acquired Sigster late 2019.
Yeah, that's incredible. I know you've got, obviously, you were director of marketing at Visage, which is part of your days at the Bay Area. And then Jazz HR is a pretty big player in the HR talent management, ATS space, right? Tracking systems. So those, I'm sure, helped shape or form you, like you said, into understanding better the B2B and definitely the SaaS kind of model of how to market to potential SaaS, personas and customers. So that's awesome. So, dive into a little bit of kind of B2B. I love how you guys dubbed it and Sanger put it as, it doesn't have to be boring to boring or business to boring, right? Mm-hmm. But since you've lived and evolved in your marketing career in the Bay Area, you know this pretty off firsthand, that there's still sort of the pragmatic approach that you have to have the type of, acquisition or growth in SaaS companies. This virtual conference you just had, Justin, with your team, talk us through that, because that's sort of trying to break that status quo, I think, of what virtual events are these days a bit, and especially obviously because we had this 2020 with a pandemic where everything kind of turned upside down in terms of not having physical conferences that we're all used to and accustomed to going to, and having to really now think very creatively around how are we going to break through the noise and sort of champion our company's vision, mission, to attract more customers, right? So I know it's a long, sort of winded multi-question there, but what is that kind of true north that you guys had to put to get this going? Because I know it must have not been easy.
It was not. And it's a really good question, because it actually kind of starts from my origin story where, when I was in San Francisco, it was all performance marketing, right? Like I was in spreadsheets all day. I was trying to shave, a couple cents off my cost per click, right? And for a long time, I thought that was marketing, right? That was kind of the end all be all of it. And as I progressed through my career, I realized, it's a lot bigger than that. And it's a lot harder than that. And that really started to show up at Sigster, where we really leaned into the brand more than I'd ever done before. And that's when things started to catch fire for my team and I. And so skip ahead to, kind of trying to plan an event 15 months into a quarantine where we've all spent, I think the stats, over 4.5 hours of every day we're on a video conference. Absolutely. Like we went into this eyes wide open that no one wants to sit in front of their computer staring at people talking to them any more than they already are. And so that's where the idea came from. Like, we need to do a virtual event. Like just because people are sick of it doesn't mean we can't do it. We just need to do it the right way. And so we partnered up with Jay Bear, who's a genius. And I came to him and was like, look, I want to do Coachella, but for B2B. And I want it to be super engaging, super fast. I want to pack as much as we can into as limited a time as possible. And so came back with this idea, like, let's just kind of supercharge it. Let's get like, the top brass B2B marketing speakers and have them talk about exactly that. Like B2B marketing isn't just performance marketing. It's so much bigger than that. And it is frustrating to me as a marketer to know how many of my peers aren't thinking outside of the box. Like they are running a marketing program like it's an operation, not like it's a brand identity, or they're trying to like really express the soul of their company. There's so much they're leaving on the table. And so we wanted to do an event that expressed that sentiment. And so we went with a very provocative name to do that. So the event was called Break Shit.
It was brilliantly done in not only the naming of it, I think, but you guys really went to the next level in terms of you guys had the landing page, the email communications before it, the video, the use of video, that was not just sort of your boring kind of head talking, like a guru speaker talking to you, but really thought out. You could see that there's a story brand sort of, like a storyboarding, I should say, that went into this, which obviously for your team and your partner who helped you with this, takes a whole lot more brain share and effort. But it also, I think, and it's a question that I have for you, being the VP of marketing at a software company where it very much can come down to what is your CPA, cost per acquisition, what's the LTV, what is our net retention numbers, all these numbers, all these acronyms, to your point, spreadsheet marketers, as I think I've heard it been done before, that is important. But then brand affinity and sort of what the mission is behind a company sometimes gets lost. And the CMO, more than ever, I think, is being responsible for both the numbers, but also on the brand affinity or how you're growing brand to create demand, right? Talk me through that a bit in terms of, do you think it's having the right C levels? In other words, having a CEO like Klopp, having an evangelist like Sangren that helps you in your position to say, you know what, we are going to do it and do this virtual conference this way rather than what everyone else is doing and playing it safe. How much of that is an influence, and what would you add to that in terms of how did that all roll out? In other words,
I think there are so many companies where the premise of this, or the charter of this event, would have died, in committee pretty quickly. And so we're really lucky because our CEO, Tim Kopp, used to be a CMO, right? And he gets it. Like, I think every marketer has a certain part on the back of their neck that when a CEO breathes down it, like, they fail. If you have a CEO that's too uptight about the marketing, it's just an uphill battle. You're not going to win. And so he trusts very deeply in our marketing team, which is phenomenal. And then my CMO, my boss, Daniel, when I pitched the idea to him, he definitely reacted. He was, kind of like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Shook his head a lot. He's kind of got this, you can't see me right now, but he always buries his head in his hands when we come to him with ideas like this. But again, was trusting enough. And we, my team believed in it enough that that's kind of what gave it life. And I think that's kind of like our MO for a lot of the stuff we do is we really care. We really want to have fun, but we also care about the product and the business and helping, our teammates bring home a paycheck. So when all those things combine, I think that humanity and that enthusiasm really shines through, and it gives us a lot of leeway to get away with stuff that other companies might not be able to.
Yeah, no, definitely. It showed in the speakers you guys chose. In fact, even how the speakers, decided to also have their own presentations, be creative, just I think to match up the level of creativity that your team brought, right? So that's great. Now, I know that other folks that would, let's say have partners in the C levels that would allow them to do such an event, or to get creative enough, and to find, outsourced third party to help with the creativity of it all and the execution. But at the end of the day, they're going to want to see attribution to qualified leads. Now, I think there was maybe over 1,000 or something attendees. Yeah. I know that, a little bit of social media got lit up, and that you guys did some prep before it in communications. Talk me through that a little bit, how that looked, and what you can share, though, of course. Yeah. What kind of were the attribution goals you guys were trying to get to, and also goals that are maybe not so, not like KPI driven or numeric in value, but maybe that you guys were able to, decipher a little bit post conference, which I'm sure you guys are still sort of doing, because it was fresh just last week a bit, but talk me through that a little bit in terms of marketing attribution expectations.
For sure. And so I'd love to have this conversation, anyone that's listening. We definitely put the cart before the horse on this one. Like, we had the good idea first, and then we're like, okay, now how do we build the business case for it? And so we kind of, built the brief, and then we signed ourselves up for a pretty bold goal. We were like, okay, we're going to drive 2,500 registrations for this. And that number was completely arbitrary. It seemed like the right number based on very limited data and like our historical performance of webinars. So not quite events like this. Right. And we ended up getting exactly 2,545 registrations for it. So we just hit the goal that we had arbitrarily placed out in the universe, and then we had over 1,000 people show up for it live. So as far as one of the first questions I got when we launched this thing, one of the AEs said, well, how much pipeline is this going to drive? I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to know, man? I'm like, there's absolutely no way I could predict how much pipeline we're going to do. I can tell you that we're going to have a very fun and engaging event that people are going to talk about, that's going to give you the opportunity to have good conversations with your prospects. As for like the actual hard attribution of it, we do have a stellar marketing ops and rev ops team. So we are tracking, we know exactly who registered, who attended. We know where they are in their opportunity cycle. They're able to sort through a list very beautifully and turn kind of a left field event into something that turns into very serious business conversations. Sure. And so that's something we will look at. But so on the one hand, I think attribution is extremely important and helps kind of inform future decisions. I will absolutely be looking at the end of the year how many opportunities break shit influenced. On the other hand, you should do things because they're the right thing to do for your brand or for your company, and not worry about that. Like, that stuff happens if you do it the right way.
I agree with you 100% that you do want to have, you want to have a bit of like that trust within your C team, and also across the aisle to your sales team, right? In that you're doing things to build brand affinity that's more the marathon than the sprint, right? The sprint in marketing would be if you were just looking at how to shave off, on cost per click, and you can literally see how many of those ads are turning into, net new leads in the pipeline. But that in the long term may not be effective or even convert as well as something like the Break Shit conference that really made people think, wow, these folks are really committed to educate, entertain, and to kind of share knowledge of other people to help us in our business, right? So it's almost like an 80-20 rule of give 20% to expect 20% back, right? Of course, sales folks always push, right? And they live on week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, and hitting numbers, right? And to be fair, of course, Justin, this, VPs of marketing and CMOs, we also live by our numbers, right? But at the end of the day, it's, I think to your point, if you can get both, at the end of the year, looking back and saying, okay, we were able to, obviously you guys are an ABM company as well. So you guys can really target and take advantage of very targeted cohorts that attended this event, and now give you're kind of rolling out the red carpet for your sales AE to be able to say, hey, we know you attended this event. How did you enjoy our special speakers? What part of it did you enjoy the most? Anything and everything to build trust, credibility, and open the doors and keep a conversation going. I think is really what you want from a marketing team to get what sales needs, right? Yep. Which is to close business. So I'll be curious to see what you guys come at the end of the year, what the conclusion is at the end of the year. I'll probably follow up with you for sure for that.
Please do. Yeah, no, I'm excited too.
Yeah, and I know even before this, you had another big project that fell on your lap coming in from Sixer, which was, you guys did a whole rebrand of the website. And I've noticed that on the website, the messaging obviously changed. And that change in messaging is, I'm presuming, the go-to-market being not just pigeonholed to being an ABM, let's say, player, right? And I've noticed in talking to other peers of yours, companies that have done that, Drift, I'm a partner of Drift as well, a reseller partner, they went through their conversational marketing that got them on the map to now a revenue acceleration. And I'm noticing this trend, Justin, and I want to ask you, for SaaS companies that are in software, that touch sort of sales and marketing in their software, I've noticed the trend since the pandemic has been how to align both their messaging and their platform itself around revenue. So what's your impression of that, or what is your take on what's happening in the market you think that's driving that?
That's what a good question. My read on it, and I'm trying to be neutral here, is that ABM's been around for let's call it 6 years now, right? It's in the mainstream. People are starting to drink that Kool-Aid pretty seriously.
Yep.
And at the same time, I think especially when COVID hit, leads kind of started to get a much more, they got a lot more scrutiny. Like, can we live and die by leads if everything's in tumult because of a global pandemic? And so I think what's happening is those two, the trends in ABM, the sudden shift from COVID, and I think just for general conversations that, what marketers are not lead generators. They are responsible for revenue. I think all these things are starting to come together at the same time where, okay, if that's true that marketing is responsible for revenue, then we need the help of our sales team. We need the help of our customer success team. We need the C-suite down to be completely aligned around the strategy. And that's, I think, what's happening, where you see our messaging being around go-to-market teams. I'm noticing a lot of our competitors doing the same thing too. And it's because ABM does not work if it's just the marketing team. It has to be a cross-functional discipline that everyone is bought into and pulling in the same direction. And when that does happen, it works extremely well. It's much more efficient. You're able to create better marketing because you're focusing, and your entire, kind of customer-facing team's able to stay aligned against, I'm not talking about our messaging, but like a company's messaging, because it's focused on a discrete number of accounts, and it feels better. I mean, at the end of the day too. So it's pretty cool to be in this space right now when this transformation is happening, because I'm a recovering demand gen marketer and am used to being completely leads obsessed. And when you kind of put that down, when you kind of walk away from leads, really cool things start to happen. Like, your marketing gets a lot more creative and a lot more enthusiastic.
Yeah, no, I love that take you just had on recovering demand gen. So I could see we could start a podcast just on that, recovering demand gen. Um, I agree with what you're saying, and it makes me think of Christopher Lochhead, category design, legend, right? Play bigger, niche down. He discussed, and I think I've seen Terminus definitely go through this, right? So they became a category leader in ABM, and then of course you've got your kind of your second tier and copycatters that come into the flood the market because there's a market, right, to be had. And then you have CMOs who have to start thinking creatively, and also the C levels in general, where is the revenue moving, where are the dollars going to for software spend, and where we can make the most impact. And just in this last year alone, to your point, because of the pandemic, I think everyone accelerated to some way to influence revenue. Gong did it with their revenue intelligence and their tool and their platform. You guys have obviously evolved, grown through acquisition with Sixter and others. And I think Chatterbox, is it?
Ramble Chat, yeah.
Sorry, Ramble Chat.
Yeah.
And so as a VP of marketing, working with a CMO and the C levels in this kind of space, when you think about content, right? Because I know that you're really, really good at content. How do you see pillar content, cluster content now changing? Because if a messaging, as you're growing into a new kind of demand niche market with your platform, how do you get your team to kind of, look at, okay, how are we going to create content? Or maybe we had content last year that has, 70% or 75% messaging is still relevant, but now we've got to, add this other layer to it. How do you go about that with your team, and how do you kind of try to scale that? Because I think that's the challenge for most software companies that are going through this kind of transformation themselves, is how to get enough creative / engageable content out there to the ICPs to help the funnel.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the way we think about it, we've got we kind of call it what do we call it? Like our brand prism or our content prism. We've got this slide that we kind of all kicked off the year with, where everything starts, boringly enough, with SEO clusters, right? Like, what are the main keywords that we care about, right? And it's like 3 or 4 for the year, and that's it. And we take those things and then we kind of refract them through this brand prism. And it's like, okay, first it has to go through our core values. Like, what are the values of Terminus that this keyword needs to go through? And how does that show up on the other end? Then we've got another kind of angle to it, where Terminus, we've got in our brand guide, if Terminus was a person, she would be a young lady named Tess from Chicago who likes alternative R&B and likes to wear, black leather jackets. So we then put it through that prism, right? Like, okay, so it's aligned to our values. Now, what would she say about it? Like, what would her take on this be? And then we do, if you look at our website, it's not floral, but it's got these things we call flourishes, right? They're kind of just like these designs. We say, okay, how can we put a flourish on this? And when we say that, it's not like, how do we actually design a little flowery thing on it? It's like, what's the unique, weird, pattern disrupting thing that we can do to this piece of content? And by the time it goes through those 3 stages, it starts out as, okay, we need a thing on intent data, and turns into, okay, we've got a nature-oriented guidebook that takes you through the forest of intent data.
Yes.
And
that was, by the way, super well done. I've gone through it myself. When you launched your website some months ago, I remember just going through it, because I've gone through for clients and I've got to probably do one for myself or our company soon, but it's always like the cobbler's kid, you doesn't have the right shoes, but anyhow, and I thought, man, this is so well done. It's interactive. It reminded me a little bit of Path Factory, but with a lot more creativity, but that whole sort of experience, right? And the feel that I got was the sort of the flowery thing you're talking about. Reminds me of just growth, and growth is what every company wants. There hasn't been not a one company that I've either worked for or have as a client that say, no, Gianni, we don't want to grow. We were good. So that it's almost like a subliminal message is the way I look at it. And a lot of these sort of like geometric shapes and, kind of designs were getting very overplayed. And if you go to almost any software company these days, I think I'm even guilty of it too with our designer. You've got these sort of like, geometric shapes that sort of offset each other. And that was sort of maybe the software look. And everyone started going in there, right? So I kind of thought it was refreshing that you guys had sort of this organic play on the blue background and what have you, right? But talk me through that, because you just described that you guys have this prism to even create that, which was pretty creative, like saying, oh, let's make it into sort of like a hiking adventure. Mm-hmm. How did that go? The creative brief, brainstorming, how did you guys come up with that and then get approved? Because maybe when you do a rebrand, as you know, all eyes are on you, right? Like the CMO knows that his CEO and sales team, everyone's looking to see what's this new website going to look like? What are we getting out in the market positioned as, et cetera, et cetera. So how did that go? Even just in that little micro content, as an example.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Like this, everyone wants to grow. And there's that like the most cliched stock image in all of marketing where it's like a person with their hands together and they've got a little soil and a tiny little sprout coming out of it, right? We liked the message. We hated the image, right? So what we did was we actually hired a graffiti artist in Atlanta to do all these flourishes for us. We're like, hey, we need these goofy designs. We know you're good at it. Make them for us. And so we actually like most of the art on our website is actually done by a graffiti artist, not even our designers. And then as it goes for the field guide, I'm going to go ahead and share the dirty secret. With the Terminus marketing team, most of our stuff starts with a dumb idea that we then just polish and believe in until it becomes a good idea. And so the entire field guide, this hiking kind of oriented thing, started because it was intent data. And so we're like, okay, wouldn't it be funny if we did it intense? Because camping, right? Like intense. And then Jillian, one of my wonderful teammates, like just took that and ran with it and was like, okay, so everything's nature themed. And that is that kind of story where it's like, okay, stupid pun, let's not go with the pun, but let's take the idea and flesh it out is, responsible for probably 75% of the stuff we're doing is, we'll have a dumb idea, we'll care and feed for it until it's big enough that it runs away from us. And then we just try our best to keep up with it. And the same exact thing happened with Break Shit. Like it was kind of a wild idea, but we cared enough and we put enough effort into it that it grew wings and flew away from us.
Wow. And I love that. I think that, as you know, working in software companies, whether they were Scrum or Agile, there was always the WAGs that stood for Wild Ass Guess. When they would ask developers, like, when do you think we can get XYZ part of the roadmap done? And they were like, well, I'll give you a WAGs, right? And so for marketing, I think the equivalent of that is sort of what you're saying, which is having a team that is, seasoned enough, and flexible enough to say, all right, let's kind of like have a brainstorm popcorn type session, come up with a concept and idea, be it, part of a creative brief, let it go through the prism you just discussed that you guys have, which I think is excellent, like a true north. And then let's refine it as we kind of are trying to get to the end creative, the end messaging, the end, sales enablement piece. And I don't know the whole process, but I've explained it and it came out great. And I think it helps also if used properly by your sales team, or it's sort of self-service, but you go on and you can just go through it, right? I think it allows for what people want more these days in B2B, for it to be more educational, entertaining than the typical kind of case studies or white papers or things that people are just not even consuming these days as much as they were maybe in the 90s, right? We definitely leapfrogged that. So speaking of that, since we've leapfrogged it, you've been at Sigster, which in itself was a category leader, now Terminus. What are you seeing in terms of what's shaping out and shaking out a little bit in SaaS right now? And I know it's a broad question, but
it is.
At least from your perspective, your point of view, what are you seeing or feeling?
My point of view. So let me unpack this. I am, and this is in the spirit of Break Shit, frustrated at the state of B2B marketing. I think you're exactly right. Like where people, it's a case study, dude. Everyone's got case studies. Every case study says wonderful things about the vendor, right? Like it's like, no shit, you're going to put that out there. There are so few B2B companies that I think are really trying to engage their audience in a meaningful way. Like, if I'm tasked with finding a vendor, sure, I'm going to look at the white papers and I'm going to look at the case studies. But if I'm not in the market, if I'm trying to figure, if I don't have an immediate need, if I don't have my boss telling me this needs to happen by next quarter or whatever, it's a noisy marketplace. And so few companies are trying to combat against that and trying to be, I think of, a company's brand team as being their entertainment division. Like, you need to get people to give a shit about you now so that a year from now, when the need is acute, you're the top of the list. And so I think the nature of SaaS as a result of that, and this is tough. And I think we could go off on a very long tangent about how this kills marketing. But when you are quarter to quarter obsessed, when you're not playing the long game because you're looking 25% short for next quarter and you need to kick in some really, really instant campaigns and programs, that's when marketing starts to die. And I get it. Like, it happens to all companies. It'll happen to Terminus one day where, we're big enough that, we can't do goofy break shit stuff because the committee will kill it. And it's unfortunate. And I really hope, what I want to hope is that I can keep that going for as long as possible. Because at some point, B2B marketing turns beige and is completely boring. And it seems to me to be like an inescapable black hole. And if I'm able to figure out a way to lengthen the amount of time where B2B marketing isn't boring, that's what I'm here to do. And hopefully if that's true, then maybe that's a sea change for all B2B marketing, but who knows? There's a lot of countervailing forces on that.
Yeah. I agree, but I second your sentiment, and I think that I would say that users are looking for that different, right? I think B2B users or customers, potential customers, at the end of the day, they're human beings, right? So they're a B2C customer, right? So the more you get to that B2C mentality in B2B, I think you're going to be able to have better brand affinity and play that long game, which is the only game to play, I think, these days. Even with all the technology we have tons of it, right? We have APM, we have artificial intelligence bots. We have a lot, right? But probably, and I think there's Harvard Business Review studies around this. There's already, in B2B especially, there's 90%, on-demand self-service research conducted already by your potential customer. So he or she has already got 2 or 3 vendors in mind. And it's now those 2 or 3 vendors in mind's job to win them over, because it could be simply just a budget thing or a time thing. They might have everything else, but maybe they're not ready to hire any or not hire, I should say, to use any software yet, because they just don't have the 100% the need or the budget, right? But the ones that are staying top of the mind, the ones that are cutting through the noise, doing creative outreach, giving more than trying to receive, right? So the non-gated forms, all that, the creative communities that they're building around their brands. I think those are the ones that are, and at least maybe for the software company, if that software company is trying to stand for something in that category or creating that category, they may purposely also want to just attract a certain type of customer, right? Whether it's mid-market or whatever, enterprise, a certain type of customer. So if your brand affinity is attracting them to come to your events, attracting them to come to your social media accounts, to consume your newsletter, whatever it is, then that's, I think, what helps separate the close won and close loss opportunities in the long game, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're right, everything is becoming sort of noisy and a blur. And I think of the customers that clients that we have, and the customers that our team has done case studies with or reached out to just to get kind of testimony, and they all pretty much say the same, regardless of the software, whether it's for higher education, whether it's for for sales management enablement or whatever. Typically, they already know who they want to go with. They might want to be with that for relationship reasons, sometimes financial reasons, but they typically already have a good feeling about someone in the market. And that's because they've been, addressing them through all sorts of communication over time. It doesn't happen. There are exceptions, obviously. There's triggers. If all of a sudden you get a new VP of marketing or a CMO, he or she comes in, whatever relationship it was in the past with whatever vendor might start slowly dying, and maybe you can come in and kind of opportunistic as an account executive or sales territory manager go after that and say, okay, that person's gone. They're no longer in bed with so-and-so software company. Here's my opportunity.
Yep.
But often, more than not, it's how have you built, kind of trust points along the sales journey. And something I think I've heard you say is that, marketing's job is to be a strategy around creating that sort of journey at every touch point for them to feel that they're getting an experience above and beyond what they're typically going to get from a competitor. You mentioned that something along those lines in the Twitter feed. I think I saw you put around, no one wants to hear about fluffy marketing, right? Just kind of the spreadsheet numbers. If your marketing team isn't driving brand demand, brand affinity, kind of changing or disrupting the market, then you're just going to be kind of lost in the sea of sameness with the rest of the SaaS companies that are competing for your same business. So I love that you have that kind of mentality, and I imagine that was formed over, your time at different companies, both in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and what you've had, you're doing here with Terminus. What helps keep you informed, to keep yourself sharp and open to those new ideas?
Oh, wow. So first of all, I don't read business books. I read enough in business school where I'm like, okay, I get it, guys. Like, it's well-trod territory, right? And so if you're talking about the sea of sameness, I think a lot of marketers go to the same watering holes, and that ends up kind of showing up when, everyone's kind of doing the same thing. I do a couple things. One, I keep my eyes out for things that are very disruptive. And I don't mean that like in a business speak, but just like, for example, the musical guest at Breakshit was Saxquatch, a 7-foot saxophone player dressed in a Bigfoot costume. Mm-hmm. I found him because I was scrolling through Reddit and I was like, what the hell is this? And next thing you know, he's playing our corporate event. So I'm kind of constantly scanning for really weird stuff, because if it caught my attention, I'm very cynical and consume a lot of content. If it catches my attention, there's something there that I would like to figure out how to repurpose. I read a lot of poetry. I think poetry is a marketer's poetry teaches people to say as much as possible with as few words as possible. And I think that's kind of an extremely important marketing skill.
I'll put you on to someone that I think you'll like. You may already know him. His name is Cole Schaefer. And Cole Schaefer, actually, he's a pretty, I think, not up and coming. He's already made it, I think. Respected content writer, copywriter. He's done things for, Christopher Lochhead of Follow Your Different podcast, other companies as well. But he's also a poet. So really, you're a prolific writer. So you'll like his stuff. If you check him out on LinkedIn, mention him. I'm trying to hire him, actually.
Oh, okay.
Cole Schaefer, really, really good. And he's a poet as well. So he's got two poetry books out. So I love you're saying that, because it goes in line with a little bit of what he said. And also Morgan Ingram, who used to work with Terminus, same thing. I asked him, what are some of the business books he read? And he threw off some, because I do believe that readers are leaders. This is part of that rapid fire question. But you're also saying that it's not the business books. So you're more into poetry. Are there any that stick out that I may then put in the show notes for some people to check out? There's
a book called Life on Mars I just read. I don't think I've got it somewhere. I don't know where I put it.
Cool. Life on
Mars.
Life
on Mars.
What is it? What is it?
It's a poetry book. It's a collection of poems. But gosh, had you not asked me, I'd remember the name of the author.
No worries. Cool, our team will Amazon, Google, look it up. Okay. It's Life on Mars poetry. Okay.
Yeah. And then the last thing I do is I look at what our competitors are doing, or what the predominant trends that I see on LinkedIn or kind of just the B2B sphere are. And then I say, okay, we got to do the exact opposite of that.
So are you by any chance related to Gong.io's CMO Udi? Because he literally said the same thing when, and he's been with his CEO for 5 years, 3 different companies, exact same thing. He tries to go, when people zig, he zags. Another person that I think you're in good company is, Dave Gerhardt from formerly VP at
Love Dave
at Drift. So Dave's another one that has that sort of mentality. Again, also had C-levels like a David Cancel, who allowed him to have that sort of freedom and mentality to think outside the box and kind of go against status quo. So I love that you're thinking like that, and it's showing in the creativity of the show. The guide and the Break Shit conference. So it's good to know that you're getting the inspiration outside of, the Drucker books and or others that we all grew up with in business school. What is there things like media? Because you're saying Reddit, but is there things like shows, TV shows or Netflix shows where you're like, man, I'm digging this, and how could I put this into B2B so it's not boring?
Yes. And I would say less. Okay, it is very Netflixy, but we do. I've got a young and pretty woke team, and so they turn me on to a lot of interesting things. So we're, this might be the world exclusive, but we're going to be launching our own TV station sometime this summer. So pretty soon there will be like an Apple TV or Roku app that you can download, TTV, where it is kind of a collection of all the videos we're doing. So we are making a huge investment into video. Some of it very, topical, ABM, Terminus, Germain. Some of it just wildly entertaining stuff that we, has some connective tissue to the brand and the movement we're trying to create, but is really there just to kind of like win people's attention and trust and give our sales team a reason to have a conversation. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do. So it's a little bit YouTube, a little bit Netflix.
This is an exclusive for Smart Chickens in almost breaking news, Terminus TV to an app near you coming soon. That's awesome. And that's congrats, because that's a pretty incredible feat, and definitely more on the B2C side than B2B. It reminds me a little bit of what MailChimp has done with their MailChimp has like a documentary.
Yep.
And it's just incredible. I mean, they've done some like Grammy award-winning type documentary stuff, right? So, kudos to you and your team. Hopefully you guys will get to that level at some point. But I love that it's thinking really outside the box, getting inspiration from other places that are more maybe B2C or just outside of what we typically think of B2B. So that's awesome, man. I'll definitely be looking for that when that comes out. Ping me on that one, because I'd love to check out what you guys came up with. So then the Saxquatch guy. So we kind of go back to him, the Saxquatch. I saw that you guys had it, and I have family in Atlanta, and my brother lived outside of Atlanta in Marietta area. Was that in a Atlanta wooded area? Then I saw a bit of smoke. Was that like a smoke machine? It was really well done, and you guys made it down to even getting the little emoji, the little poop emoji, hanging as a piñata on a tree. So, like, how who came up with that kind of like sort of interesting, bizarro kind of like backdrop?
So I don't know. I think Saxquatch is very elusive. I don't think he would reveal his location. He's not in Georgia, but I do think he's on the East Coast, kind of Appalachian thing somewhere. And this was, again, like it goes back to what I was saying, like we have a dumb idea and we just polish it until it's a good idea. Right. So I screenshotted Saxquatch on Reddit, emailed it to myself. So in the morning, I remember I sent it to my teammate, Jillian, again, and saying, hey, this guy's playing break shit. Can you get in touch with him? And she kind of had the idea like, well, we should have him actually break shit, right? And I'm like, yes, obviously he should break shit. So what do you want to do? And she's like, okay, here's a poop emoji piñata. Yes, that's perfect. And this is really like, I mean, I don't know, this doesn't scale. I don't know how applicable this will be to your listeners, but I can't tell you, like, we had so much success from just dumb ideas that we loved into being good ideas.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you can scale it. I think as long as you have like an ideation committee and where there's no wrong or right, and everyone's willing to put in or submit their goofball idea, right? As long as you have the right team, like the corporate culture, because that influences, of course, like you said. You've got a C-level and a CFO that all they're worried about are numbers, and they don't care too much for creativity outside of make my ads a bit creative, but make sure they're under the CPA spend that I've aligned here on the spreadsheet. Then it's likely that you're not going to be able to throw a break shit type of event, right? But so I guess you have to kind of know who you're with, right? I think that's why, maybe you put it as well, but life's too short to work for a CEO that doesn't get marketing. I think you might have said that. Dave Gerhardt has said that. All the folks that really understand marketing as a strategy and not as we're here to make pretty logos and fluffy KPIs, understand that. So hopefully those companies that will hear this are companies that have C-levels that are open to creative marketing. That's the long game, not the short game.
Yes. And if you're not, here's a tip. So I don't know if you listen to this, but Tim Kopp, my CEO, I was pretty sure when we were planning break shit that he'd be fine with it. right? But it was a pretty audacious thing to do. I didn't tell him about it until the day before it launched. So basically, the last thing I did before we launched it was I Slacked him. I was like, hey, this is going live tomorrow. Let me know if you have any issues with it. Otherwise, great. Like, so it was kind of too late for him to really say no.
And Justin Keller, that's ballsy. But I think it's only ballsy because you had all your ducks in a row. You had backing, I'm sure, from other stakeholders and C-levels that would have, had your back. And I think the results will speak for themselves when it's all said and done, right? And if nothing else, the brand affinity, which is becoming harder and harder to achieve these days around SaaS companies that have very similar type software. Like if you had to put software A with software B, decision makers in those committees are always going through the checkbox. Well, this one has this one doesn't have this one, so anything and everything that you can do in marketing, I think as a strategy to separate yourself from the rest is a good thing. And most, of your C-level colleagues would champion that or be behind that, right? So I know that we're coming close to the hour. So as respect, because I could talk to you for hours, let me see if I can get you some of these rapid fire questions. You kind of already killed one, but let's see if we can go to another one. So if you were to, I'm in the 4th floor, I'm on my 40s, so we're probably contemporary somewhat maybe. If you could jump back to the future on the DeLorean with Marty and Doc and speak to a younger Justin Keller around your career journey or what have you, what would you say to him?
Oh man,
What advice?
I was very cocky in my 20s, and I would regret that all the time because I think it impeded my career in a lot of ways. But it also kind of gave me the gumption to just pack up and move to San Francisco without a place to sleep and figure that out. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I'd say, hey, lighten up a little bit, but still be kind of as bold and audacious as you were back then.
Yeah, that's some pretty good advice. And you went from Purdue or from the East Coast all the way to, right? Mm-hmm. West to the West Coast. Yeah, that's a pretty bold proposition. So that's awesome that you were able to make it, right? Not everyone can say they have. And I know we discussed a little bit about, that readers are leaders, and you discussed poetry books as part of your inspiration, as well as kind of sounds to me like you like to be in touch with what's happening in the media and then seeing how you can circle that back into your marketing events or messaging, correct?
Yep.
What are some of the other outlets that you kind of look out for or watch?
That's a good question. So it kind of goes back to like what I was saying about, look at what other B2B companies are doing and go the exact opposite direction. I'm kind of constantly scanning, all the social media, not all. I haven't quite figured out TikTok. But other than that, kind of like what are other marketers doing that's different? What are B2C marketers doing? Especially I look to B2C because they're 3 or 4 years ahead of B2B in every possible way. And what they're doing now will be late to the party doing in 3 years. So I'm trying to get there first as much as possible.
Interesting you say that. So when I think of B2C, what they've done a lot, they're all hedging on like, digital natives being the generation that's going to be the most, influential for consumership, NFTs or anything to do with digitalizing pretty much anything and everything, right? So I guess you guys are sort of there with at least digitizing your events. Sooner than later, I think the country's getting back to some sense of normalcy. So user conferences and actual events like inbound, from HubSpot and others, or Salesforce, SaaS events are probably going to come back. So there's going to be physical presence needed as well. How do you anticipate that impacting, kind of the detour that we've all had to take in marketing with Zoom meetings and virtual events?
That's a good question. I think in the near term, brands are going to have to be aware of the tone, right? If they try and throw the biggest possible get-together possible, that's going to be a bad look. So I think, and this is very ABM-ish, I think what should happen is narrow the focus. If you're going to have a 1,000-person event, use that same amount of money for a 100-person event, but just spoil the ever-living crap out of the 100 people that come and create a really strong affinity with them. Long term, it's a good question, because I think there will be like a strong reaction where it's like, okay, no more Zooms, like we're in person all the time now, and it'll probably settle back more digital than it was before. So I think virtual events are here to stay. We just debriefed on the break shit thing, and it's like, the great thing about this event is that it is digital first, right? Like you couldn't pull this off live. Actually, it was kind of the inverse of a live event, where so many live events tried to pivot to being virtual. This was the opposite, where this was entirely virtual first.
That's true.
And so like we want to do something similar again next year and kind of make this an annual thing. And I think that the environment will be, kind of amenable to that.
Yeah, that's a good take. Interesting you said that. Yeah, the pendulum is swinging back, where you can have 2 or 3 days where people that want to or choose to come back and not have to work totally remote can. But it'll be interesting to see how that shapes out to things like you mentioned, conferences and such. So that's interesting. Now, so you've got a lot on your plate. You've got a team. You've got you guys recently got 100 million VC capital injection. So there's obviously expectations for growth. What do you do to recharge, reboot during the week? Because I'm presuming you've got hectic weeks with a lot of good things going on.
They're busy, they're fun, and I love it. Like I'm lucky to say that like I work 9-10 hour days easy on the reg, but I enjoy so much of it. There are days though when the two things I really do is I've got this piano right here. I've got like, you can't see a lot of music gear here. So I'm a musician, producer kind of person. That's one of my big focuses. And then I love to cook. And that's my other thing. It's a very mindful activity for me, where it's just like, I can just kind of like focus on making a really awesome dinner. And that is a huge recharge for me. I'll probably have a couple drinks while I'm doing it too. And that's the third secret.
Right. That's great. I'm sure, especially when it's with family, right? To be doing that. Because we are working from home until the pendulum swings back more to the other side, right? So that's awesome that you do that to recharge and reboot. Now, was there anything I didn't ask or discuss that you'd like to talk about?
No, I do think that the conversation, and I don't even know if I should open this can of worms, Gianni, but like kind of the B2C B2B convergence, I think is real. Like I think B2B is finally catching up. And I think at the other side of that, so like, marketers are waking up. Buyers, 64% of buyers millennials are now at 64% of the deals. Like they're at the table on them. And if you think about the generational gaps, like I do not understand Gen Z, like what is going on with these kids? Like I love them, don't get them. Same is true for, Gen X boomers, millennials. I think companies are going to have a very rude awakening in the next 2-3 years when it goes from 64% of the deals to 100% of the deals. And millennials are the senior decision makers that are able to sign $1 million checks. And they need to be talked to, marketed to, built relationships with very much differently. Like they're not the kind of people where you take them out to the golf course and you're going to win a deal there. Totally different paradigm that we're walking into.
Wow. You know what, Justin, that's a great insight, because you're right. Demographically, the population is changing in the workforce. We have a client, a digital hire. They have a pretty cool platform. It's a video resume first and video interviewing platform. And that's because, millennials and Gen Zs, they're digital natives. So they want to be able to get their persona, their person, who they are, across, not in a, to your point, not at a golf course, not from a resume that goes into an ATS. And I know you work at Recharge, so you get it, right? Those days are sort of gone. So you're right. So if companies aren't already kind of sort of forecasting into the future in terms of their messaging, they're not just their software and platforms, that is going to evolve, but how are you connecting and communicating to the future decision makers? But how are you doing that today? Because they're already there. And, baby boomers are more and more retiring, and, and it's succession planning. So Gen Xers, which I'm presuming you are, maybe one, we're maybe the only generation that kind of had the foot in both doors, like pre-internet, everything digital to what we know now. And we are probably managers, directors, whatever we are, that embrace it, because we know that that's, if we're in business in SaaS, especially, we have to. But you're right that this is a great insight into what are you doing to make sure that you're communicating to future decision makers in those, 5-6 level people decision-making committees. If you're not speaking to them in the channels that they're most, appropriate for communication. So that's awesome. Well, listen, how can, people connect with you and find out more about both Terminus and also about your marketing and sales strategy and leadership? Where can they find you?
They can find me on almost all of the social media at Justin Keller, one word, Keller. at Terminus, Terminus. And I hopefully, I mean, you know, we're pretty prolific and like to shout about what we're doing a lot. So hopefully you can catch wind of it and we don't annoy you. But you know, love kind of just sharing what we're up to. And so that's pretty much where you can find us.
That's awesome. Well, again, Justin, it's been a true pleasure having you on the Smart Chickens podcast. And hey, all the best and keep breaking shit. I'll definitely be looking out for your, your TV series or TV app that's going to be coming out, and we'll keep in touch as much as we can. So thanks again. Have a great rest of the week and second half of the year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Johnny. This was a blast. I would sit here talking to you all day as well. So have a good one. Thank you again.
You too, Justin.
If you get value from our podcast content, make sure to leave a review, share, and connect with our host, Gianni Quintana, on LinkedIn.